is presented, whenever it is, for investigating the veracity of claims and settling claims, that there's a separate tribunal for that. I hope so that we don't add to the workload of the NIS staff who are going out of their way, at least the ones that I work with, to make things happen. And because of COVID, we had situations where the secretary to my tribunal, Ms. Shekenia Mears, was leaving and going downstairs and getting people from their cars to bring them back up so they could be heard, to keep the social distancing happening. Because we are serious about it, but really and truly, Mr. President, it was a little heavy duty. So we said the other person in my tribunal is Mr. Kenny McDowell. Okay. He made some submissions, and so the people are now able to come upstairs. So things are happening. But and we've moved on. We're doing British American and other persons. I'm seeing applications from 2017. We are in 2020. So this hopefully has its own people. But what's imperative is that you know the procedure to follow to make sure that you are within the confines of the law. You're not confusing people. You're not disadvantaging people. You're not doing things that ought not to be happening because you have the human resources to draft. From the time things started to take a turn in the hotel industry in March, somewhere, somehow, somewhere in some labor office, there should have been movements to start drafting this legislation. Because it was only a matter of time before the 13 weeks started to loom. And the 13 week and the extension is not only to protect employers. It also needs to protect employers from people who will claim severance just because they could and because they don't understand that after, you know, there are people who think that if they leave or if they resign, they can get paid out. There are people who think that they're going to get 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 because they worked somewhere for 20 years because they don't understand that the calculation is based on schedules, either in the Severance Payments Act or if you're unfairly dismissed in the employment rights legislation. And on that note, Mr. President, as we digging up and amending, can we reconcile the anomalies between the Severance Payments Act, the Employment Rights Act? Can we do a labor code? Can we get this thing done properly? Now's the time. Now, when we do this, my question is, what happens at the end of the 9 weeks? What happens next? Are we coming back to do further legislation? What are we doing? How do we protect the employer? The reasonable employer. I heard Senator Holder talking about people that are employing 5 people. What about the person that's employing 1 or 2 but still can't pay severance because that person has been with you for 30 years, 20 years? We need to do this thing. I don't understand when things are not being done properly. In this instance, now we're going to pass this because we need this. Now, we're going to pass it whether or not there are things that need to be improved. I wouldn't say fixed this time around. I would say improved. But then we're not going to come back to it. And then it'll be over in July. Meanwhile, those who have to actually deal with it, apply it, and have practical interaction with it will be confused because there's no procedure. I fail to see how we are here to pass this very important sunset legislation and we don't have the procedure. We don't have the protections for either parties, either the employers or the employees, as it relates to complying with the legislation and ensuring that somebody who does not fit into this frame is trying to piggyback on what they see a benefit for this type of severance payment claim. I also wonder, Mr. President, in the substantive principle, in the Principal Act, the court to appeal to is the High Court. Is it that if you're appealing the decision of the tribunal with this piece of legislation, you're going to the High Court too? So then how is the person going to get severance in 2020? I'm just asking, sir. Section 39 of the Principal Act makes provision for appeals to the High Court. If we're appealing to the High Court with this particular sunset legislation, will they get their severance this year? And if the whole point for them to get the severance is to help them, how are they going to get it? Are they going to be heard? And how much time does the tribunal have to deliver a decision in this environment and in this time frame? Where, by the way, are they going to sit? Because space at the NIS building is limited too. Sorry, sir. So, the logistics. The logistics. Where are they going to be heard? When are we getting the procedure so we can get started? What about the persons who wanted to claim at the end of the 13 weeks? They now have to add another 9. This administration adds time to things a lot. Like 15 years here, 9 weeks there. You know. What about the people who are ready to claim now? Or we're going to be able to claim at the beginning of July because their 13th week came up then? What about those people? And what's going to happen to the fund if every employer says, I cannot pay severance? What's going to happen to the fund when the person says, I can't pay severance? So people come and claim however long it takes, and then NIS is supposed to get that back from the employer. But Senator Drates is hoping that money will be there for her when she's 45. I don't know, because she's all of, right now, about 30 years from now. Mr. President, as it relates to procedure again, I noticed that the proposed legislation speaks to an employee giving notice of intention to claim. That's very clear. The employee gives notice of intention to claim. An employer, however, can give a counter notice, but there's no definition, explanation, or anything as to what that means. So an employer who wants to give a counter notice so that it doesn't have to pay severance, but he's not told what that means. So do you send in a notice, I want to submit a counter notice? What that means? What are the conditions under which he has to give the counter notice? And even if he's given the conditions, what is it that he has to say? What is it that he has to prove? What is it that he has to do? If we're doing this within the time frame of the 1st of June to the 31st of July, we need to know now so that it can be effective now, so that everybody can benefit from the sunset legislation now. What is a counter notice? I don't know what it means. If I was an employer and somebody said I want to claim severance, what do I say? Do I say, I'm going to employ this person, I should be back up and running in a week? Or should I say, I can't pay, give me a minute? What do you say? It needs to be defined. It always concerns me when things are missing. You draft it, you sprinkle it with the words counter notice, you don't explain what it means, but an employer has to do it in order for certain things to happen. I'm just saying, Mr. President, could we spend a little more time on the legislation so that when it comes up here, it is without any ambiguity, without errors, without things missing, especially this one where it is supposed to be that you can hit the ground running. We are looking to help people if it becomes necessary. I noticed that Senator Franklin did a lot of talking about employees need to be protected, and I am hoping that the word protection doesn't have to feature prominently with this legislation. But if it is that parties need to be protected from each other, it behoves the government to ensure that the drafting of the legislation is such that it fulfills the purpose. Everybody's protected. The purpose of this legislation, as I see it here, it is an amendment herein made to the Severance Payments Act are in consequence of the public health emergency declared by the proclamation by the Governor General on the 28th day of March 2020. And then it goes on to outline all the types of employees that have arisen from this terrible, terrible, terrible disease that has wreaked havoc on the world. I have one last question, Mr. President, and I believe Senator Franklin mentioned it. In the principal legislation, in section 6, I believe it is, 30 weeks gives you severance, or 16 in a 26-week period. We've gone to 22 with this legislation, but then you've gone to 18 in a 24-week period. And I'm just curious as to the reason why we've gone up and come down with the one that is broken. 18 weeks in a 24-week period as opposed to 16 in a 26. When you do things like that, I'm going to ask why. What's the rationale? I understand why we've gone from 13 to 22 because you're giving back the 9 weeks that the country was on lockdown. Personally, I don't understand it because, as I believe Senator Franklin said, we can't be ready in 9 weeks. So the wiggle room that you're going to get for some people who have been able to come back to work, they may be able to get going. But I don't know if it's going to be enough that people are going to be able to come back to full-time work or if they're going to have to do part-time work until things are happening. Because people are still reluctant to go out, so people are still reluctant to do certain things. Not all businesses are up and running fully, notwithstanding the lifting of the restrictions, allowing people's businesses to start back. So 9 weeks, yes, is what the period of time that we were closed. But it seems to me that you needed more time to protect everybody. That's my opinion. It seems to me, and we need to avoid all these different pieces of legislation and amendments where you get to the point where you don't know what the law is because there's so many different pieces to it. You're chopping and you're adding, you're amending, you're doing things in little pieces. The trade unionists don't think it was necessary. I believe it was, for the simple reason the Severance Payments Act says 13 weeks or 16 and 26. That has already happened for some people, about to happen for some people, or will happen shortly for some people. And if you have a law that can lead to confusion or breach, you need to remedy the situation. So I have no difficulty with the rationale behind it. I thought we would have had it ages ago. And again, I say, and I'm asking, we have this running from the 1st of June to the 31st of July. It hasn't been passed yet. Today is the 17th. We've lost 17 days. And like I said, we still cannot get going because we do not have the procedure. We don't know what the tribunal is. Please don't send it to mine. I'm full. And my schedule is already, I have a schedule all the way down to July already. So we're remedying and we're fixing, but we're not doing it properly. But nobody can say that the government didn't bring an amendment. But how you bring it? That's my question. That's always my question. Let's do things properly, Mr. President. This ought to have been something that whoever needed it, be it employee or employer, could hit the ground running. And I'm not calling for perfection, but it needs to be practical. It needs to be able to be workable. Currently, this isn't workable even if we pass it because nobody knows what happens next. And with those very few words, Mr. President, I am extremely obliged to you.
Thank you. Senator Cummings? Turn.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wish to lend my support to this bill, Mr. President, for several reasons. I acknowledge the points which have been made by the speakers who have gone before me. I think there are very powerful arguments which have been made by all of the speakers before, in particular Senator Moore, whose presentation was riveting, it was substantive, it was emotional, it was practical, it was real. We understood the substance of what she was saying, the spirit of what she was saying, and it was well delivered. I also recognized the contribution made by Senator Boyce, who, although a bit muffled because he was speaking through the mic while wearing his mask still, and I didn't capture all of it, I understood the spirit of what he was attempting to say, and I think it was an important contribution. Senator Holder, on our side, also from the private sector perspective, and then just now we also heard from Senator Tate on the practicalities of the legislation. But Mr. President, I also heard Senator Franklin, and I want to start there for one main reason. Mr. President, if I were to frame my comments and to give a theme to it, I would call it the imperative of multidimensional leadership. Mr. President, it is an easy thing for me, and perhaps many of us, even though we have several different levels of responsibility for several different things in our own personal and private lives, to stand on the outside and to make determinations about what is and what should not be, and all that has to be done is this and all that has to be done is that. But it is a different matter, Mr. President, when the weight of leadership actually sits on your shoulders. And I have heard from all of the speakers here today, Mr. President, the employer's perspective, the role of the employment tribunal, the weight that they are carrying, the role of the employee and the challenges being faced there, the tourism sector, the construction sector, the role being played by government, Mr. President, a government that we all knew, because we didn't just manifest here today, was in financial challenge well before this even hit and was now on the road to recovery. Those are the multidimensional elements, Mr. President, among so many others, that a leader has to consider. There is no single issue that a leader has the luxury of focusing on singularly. And we have a Prime Minister, Mr. President, who I call her, I don't even quite know what to call her at times. I don't know if she sleeps. Many of us don't know when she sleeps, if she sleeps, and how she manages to balance so many things. But she has attempted to treat to multidimensional leadership in a way that I don't know if we have seen before in this country, Mr. President. She has attempted, through the instrument that we spoke to earlier about the social partnership, to hear from labor, to hear from all of the trade unions, to expand the membership even of the social partnership to include financial institutions like the credit union. Some of us in here are members of the credit union movement. Beyond the banking institutions, we hear from the hoteliers and all of the business support organizations. And there is not a single major decision or minor decision made in this country, Mr. President, that has not gone through the mechanism of consultation. Consultation upon consultation upon consultation. And Mr. President, I think, we have to be sensitive to the work that the medical professionals in this country are undertaking. But I think that some of us need to have our thought processes examined by professionals, even if it puts more weight on our medical professionals, because what we say and how we think is simply not normal. Mr. President, explain to me how, in a circumstance where we are dealing with an extraordinary moment that is not local, it is not regional, it is not employers or employees, it is not one sector or another, it is everywhere in the world. 244 regions of the world, 200 countries, 189 overall, all affected by some of the same things. And we somehow think that there is a single magic bullet in a single sector or for a single issue that is going to provide us with the answers. We accuse our Prime Minister on more than one occasion of things like being dictatorial. This government wants to abuse its majority, whether it's 29.5 or 30 in this place, to run ramshod over the people of Barbados. This consultative government, this government that talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and then talks some more until the same people on the other hand say you talk too much. They need to be examined, Mr. President. Whoever they are, wherever they are, Senator Tate. We have people who on the one hand say, you don't need to come in here with that, Mr. President. But if you didn't come in here with that, Mr. President, they will call you a dictator. If you did not have the consultations, and if you did not subject it to the rigor of a parliamentary process, and if you did not subject it to the rigor of the requirement of a 2/3 majority, on the other hand, they will simultaneously call you a dictator. They need to be examined, Mr. President, because they can't decide. And I'm not surprised, because surely when you campaign on a Barbados Labour Party ticket, run an election and suddenly decide you are something other than what you were before, I'm not surprised by that. You don't know if you are fish or fowl. Half or whole. So you can't pick a side and stay on it. You can't have a consistent position and you can't be logical. Mr. President, this Barbados Labour Party government, led by the Honourable Mia Amor Motley, has done more to ensure that the 30,000 in this country by way of a BOSS program that we approved this morning, by way of ensuring that the thousands that were meant to be going home by a person whose voice has now become, I don't even quite know what it is, no longer went home, did not go home, by launching a national training initiative to make sure that those that did have to go home were retooled, retrained, reskilled, and then put into new opportunities. This is the Barbados Labour Party administration that doesn't care about 30,000 people. This is the Barbados Labour Party administration that is responding only to the wit of so-called employers. This Labour Party administration, Mr. President, this Labour Party administration that found opportunities for people who are reading and keeping our streets to spruce up Barbados, this Labour Party administration, Mr. President, we need to be examined because we are not consistent. We speak through both sides of our mouths with forked tongues. I don't mean we on this side at all. Those who the cap fit must wear it. They know who they are. Mr. President, I stand by this legislation today in the confidence, the full confidence, that this administration has done everything in its power under the most difficult of circumstances from May 2018 to ensure that multidimensional leadership was the umbrella under which we governed. We ensured, Mr. President, that every sector and every element of this country was able to live. Now, I want to put into context what is happening here. Now, I happen to have responsibility for one of the entities that has functioned throughout this period. And I want to take this opportunity, and every time I stand in this place, I have to recognize the work being done by the Bridgetown Port. By the Bridgetown Port. Mr. President, if we're talking tourism, and we're talking about the tourism sector, I cannot not speak about the work being done by the Bridgetown Port. Now, we have not laid off, severed, or any of our laborers. That is not even on our radar. But that does not mean, Mr. President, that as an employer that does not have a call on central government resources, that we have not faced the same challenges that every other employer in this country is facing. It does not mean, Mr. President, that we are not facing the same challenges, Mr. President, when we look at the global outlook. And what is that global outlook? In March, IATA estimated that the global travel industry was going to be losing somewhere in the vicinity of $113 billion in a month alone. Some of the largest companies in the world, the top 100 companies in particular, they lost in the course of just in the course of a few days, trillions of dollars. Every single sector, and I'm going to speak about a few of them tonight, was affected without exception. I want to talk about some of those industries. Travel industries, for example, travel restrictions cost travel over $200 billion. The aviation industry lost about $113 billion in just a few weeks. The US-based airlines have already been seeking a bailout somewhere in excess of $50 billion, and that's just the US-based airlines. In the hospitality industry, hotels, $150 billion in a bailout is being sought, and that's based on what the New York Times tells us. In the US and the UK, some EU countries have already seen a loss of jobs amounting to 24.3 million persons. In the US alone, that number is about $3.9 million. This is not a Barbados challenge. This is not a local issue. This is not a Barbados government or a Mia Amour Motley issue. This is not a Barbados Labour Party issue. And I wish that in the words of our Senator Boyce, who is exceptionally independent, as we know, he says it all the time, I wish that there is a moment where we could rise to the occasion and put partisanship and opposing for opposing sake aside. The sporting industry lost billions of dollars in a few weeks. In shipping, and this is where I come to the port, shipping, including cruise, seafarers, over 250,000 seafarers have fought and struggled over the last few months. Presently in the Bridgetown port, on across 11 ships, as at today, we have close to 2,500 seafarers at sea who have been here or offshore or at sea, wherever they were on ships, for close to 60 days. Many of them have already had their contracts ended, their employment has already been terminated, yet they cannot go home. This is a global problem, Mr. President. This is a global problem. In the event industry, prior to 2020, you had over 1.5 billion persons employed in this industry. And I'm only giving these statistics, Mr. President, because I need us to understand that sometimes, while all politics is local, our perspective must never be parochial. This is a challenge that is unprecedented, and when we look at how recessionary conditions have rolled out over the years, what happened in the 1998 crisis was entirely different to what happened in 2016, and entirely different, certainly, than anything that we have seen now in 2020, than anything that happened before. There is no business, no employer, no employee that could have prepared for where we are today. Now, Senator Holder said something that I want to spend a moment on. And she talked about the difficulties of employers. Mr. President, it is not an easy thing on any given day as an employer to stand up and try to figure out how you are going to pay your employees. I know some employers, in particular smaller ones, who themselves with mortgages and families and everything else to support like everyone else because their needs are no different than ours, who forego paying themselves and looking after their own obligations in order to look after others. And they do so in a thankless environment because we live in a country sometimes where you do, you're damned, you don't, you're damned anyway. So it never matters. Tomorrow, someone else, whether you have given that up or not, will still come and say, we want more. That is the reality of the environment in which we live. You cannot please some people. And so this is a difficult moment to even try to politicize it or to try to minimize it. And so the draft bill that is before us speaks to the issue of severance by way of a number of weeks that we're facing and attempting to keep these businesses afloat, because the Wall Street Journal tells us in an article this week, it says governments have two options. Businesses are in survival mode and they will not survive without some level of either loans from financial institutions or government intervention by the way of policy measures or financial support. This government has provided both. Policy measures, even if not perfect, as has been shared by Senator Tate, and I'm sure that we have heard what those comments are, as well as financial support. This is the moment that is required of us now. This is where we have to go, Mr. President. And in the absence, and I heard the leader of government business here say earlier, in the absence of concrete recommendations on what would be more creative than a BOSS program, or what would be more substantive than a program to deal with the employers and 13 weeks of severance. We are only hearing the criticisms by people who do not carry the mantle of leadership and have the luxury of opposing. They do not have the luxury, they do not have the responsibility of having to consult or having to make difficult decisions or having to balance employers and employees and sectors and industries and multilateral and regional and local and all kinds. They don't have those challenges, Mr. President. And because our Prime Minister makes it seem so easy, they take for granted that there's a comfort to it. There are no decisions that are being made here that are easy ones, Mr. President. None. The Cabinet of Barbados has considered these recommendations. They have consulted extensively with all of the stakeholders covering all of these various sectors from all of the perspectives. They have been engaging multilaterally as well, Mr. President, and they have come to the conclusion that this is what is needed, not in an individual wisdom, but in a group consultative process. And so in my closing comments, Mr. President, I want to say that this administration understands that we are in a new environment. Business has to change, both in the public and in the private sector. This morning we dealt with public. This afternoon, tonight, we're dealing with what's happening in the private sector, specifically tourism. And with that in mind, we are committed to not just having this particular legislation, but supporting this particular industry also through the National Training Initiative by ensuring that Barbados' tourism industry is retooled, retrained, reskilled, and repositioned for a rebirthing, perhaps not in 9 weeks, but certainly in a realistic time frame that allows our island to thrive. And with these few words, Mr. President, I give my support to this bill, and I'm much obliged to you.
Senator Grant, you're the next speaker, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was on Monday, July the 24th, 2017, that I ventured to Queen's Park to participate in a march where the representatives of labor, trade unions, and the representatives of the private sector locked arm in arm and walked together. So I participated in that march not as Rudy Grant. I participated as the CEO of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. So I do not share the view that the relationship between labor and capital, the representatives of the workers and those in the private sector, that relationship has to be antagonistic. I do not share that view. The reason, sir, that the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association participated in the march and walked alongside the workers' representatives was because we were fighting for a common cause and we had a common purpose. And at that time, and Senator Holder made reference to it, at that time there was a government in place that was not prepared to have the necessary consultation that is extremely important. Sir, I participated in quite a number of meetings, and meetings leading up to what is before this house, this bill that is before this house. And I would have said at those meetings, sir, that when I walk into the meetings, when I see the representatives of labor, it is like going and meeting family and friends. The truth is, sir, that even though at times there may be differences, and even though at times the language may become muscular, it is never an environment where there is disrespect. It is always one where we are able to find the compromise, as we had to do, sir, with this bill. The Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association would have written to the government indicating that we had a concern in relation to Section 6 of the Severance Payments Act. In the meetings which we had, it was very clear that the position of the workers' representative, the Barbados Workers Union, was that the Severance Payments Act really should not have been interfered with. But, sir, I believe it's the classical political thinker Edmund Burke who made reference, sir, to the fact that he talked first of all government, then he said in everything essentially that there is progress. It comes about through compromise and barter. And I want to re-emphasize the point that the bill that is before us is one that occurred, sir, through compromise. And when I speak of compromise, sir, I'm speaking of compromise in the context of not compromising values or positions or anything like that, but being able to find a common point, a common area, a common position that we could support. And of course, sir, barter represents a give and take. I'm sorry I have to say that the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, we believe that it's important to support the rights of workers. That is critical and that is important. And I heard Senator Moore make reference to the fact that the BHTA has communicated with the BWU. And that is true, and I believe in one of the online newspapers, there's reference today of communication that would have been sent by the BHTA to the Barbados Workers Union. And we identified a number of things, sir. We talked about having a coordinated response to deal with the challenges that exist. But we also committed that each party would furnish each other immediately with details where the high standards that we speak about are not being adhered to and are not being met. Sir, Senator Moore would have been in the discussions with me, and she would have heard this. There's a hotelier who sat down with his staff, and as he was speaking about the challenges and the difficulties that they have, he cried because he has a concern for his workers. There was a hotelier that communicated that there's constant dialogue and communication with their staff. And the reality is, sir, that no business can properly function without the support of the workers. And therefore, the position of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, not only by words but by actions, because I made the point as well in the meetings, that this is a time to properly address any challenges and issues that we have, and a time to reset those areas that need to be reset. And that is a commitment we give as the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. I heard the remark made, sir, that hotels that they replace the old plantations. And the suggestion going out is that there are these large number of hotels that abuse the workers' rights and take advantage of the workers. I have said in this chamber before that Master, they're done. I said so in this chamber. And sir, I lead an organization as its CEO that is committed to ensuring that there are the highest level of work ethics and commitment to workers' rights. We believe in justice and fairness. And I've said to the Barbados Workers Union, where there are practices which do not reflect the very highest standards, share the information with us. We will check. And if it is that there are any breaches, then we will respond accordingly to that. And I'm hoping, sir, that what will happen is that coming out of the dialogue that we had in relation to this bill, that we would see and seize the opportunity for deepening the partnership between the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association and the Barbados Workers Union. Sir, it is important, particularly at this time, that there's no reference or identification of superiority or inferiority. Everyone matters. Everyone matters. And we cannot function with capital alone. We cannot function with workers alone. And we are at a stage where we face significant challenges. Sir, in 2018, delivering the CEO report at the BHTA's AGM, I made reference to the philosopher Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who said the only constant in life is change. Of course, when I referenced that then, I never contemplated the kind of change that we saw and are seeing with COVID-19. And in this kind of environment, it is therefore critical and important that all of us join hands. Sir, I am remembering a quote from the American civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. We must live together like brothers, or we will perish together like fools. So this is not a time for a divide. This is a time, sir, when we must collaborate with each other. But sir, there's some things that I just want to touch on briefly, because I recognize that the hour is late, and I don't intend to keep the chamber too long. The reason why the BHTA would have written to the government was the concern in relation to if persons at different tourism enterprises decided that they would activate their severance, which they have the right to do under the existing Severance Payments Act, after being laid off for 13 weeks or for 16 out of 26 weeks. And I, sir, had a survey done with 60% response at the time from our hotels. And the figure with respect to severance from that 60%, sir, was in excess of $90 million. And the point has to be made that it would be impossible for businesses to be able to carry that kind of burden. Sir, look, I'm going to reflect on some of the figures. I'm not going to call the names, obviously, but I'm going to reflect on some of the figures, sir. $1.3 million, $10.5 million, $2.7 million, $2.4 million. They're talking about individual hotels, individual. $6 million, $3 million. Sir, in excess of $90 million. And you are talking, sir, about a situation where these hotels and the tourism enterprises have not been getting any revenues. Zero revenues, sir. And the question has to be, therefore, where would the money have to come from? And where we are looking for the money to come from, the truth is that government doesn't have a lot of money either. But I want to make this point, that what we are seeking to do and what the BHTA is desirous of doing is to ensure that we are able to secure the survival of businesses and to secure jobs. I made the point earlier today, sir, that if we are going to get out of this economic crisis, then we got to put people to work. There got to be economic activity. And it makes absolutely no sense having an environment where there's the possibility that businesses can close down. Mr. President, we can engage now in all of the training that we desire. We can engage in all of the enhancement of our product offering. We can facilitate construction activity to build new tourism enterprises and build new attractions. But when we reopen for commercial activity and businesses have not survived the COVID-19 pandemic, then workers too, Mr. President, will feel a significant burden that they will have to carry. Sir, we had, I thought, some extremely good talks, and we have committed, sir, that we will continue to collaborate and we will continue to go forward together. I heard Senator Moore speak about injustice and mistrust. And I want to give her the assurance that we will stand side by side. Let us know what the issues are. I stand on the floor of this chamber and I am confident in saying that the vast majority of the hotels in Barbados function upright and are interested in their workers. Where there are any issues, please let us know, and we will work together. Sir, I do have to compliment the Barbados Workers Union and the government in terms of the discussions that we had in bringing this bill before this honorable chamber. Those discussions were very professional, they were mature, and they centered around the survival of business and maintaining the rights of workers. I spoke about Martin Luther King a few minutes ago, and he was given a speech, sir, I believe it was in Oregon, back in 1969. And that the audience that he was speaking to included both, well, mixed races. And he spoke specifically to the Negro workers. And he said, don't just do good Negro work. He said words to the effect that if you are a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper. He said sweep like Michelangelo painted. I believe those were his words. Yeah. That's what he said. And the point that I'm making is that in this environment, not just for workers, but all of us, sir, must do our best. We have to. Because if we are going to truly be able to transform and we are going to be truly able to come out of this very difficult and challenging time, then all of us have to do our best. So, Mr. President, sir, I am very happy in supporting this piece of legislation. I believe that this amendment to the Severance Payments Act is very important. It is important at this time, particularly when there are a number of businesses that have sought to institute measures to help workers along. We would have advised, sir, at the BHDA, a lot of our members to institute and to offer vacation first before looking at layoffs. Layoff came as a second option, but the reality is that there is no business, and I think the extension of the time is appropriate to allow businesses some breathing space and to allow them, sir, to be able to keep as many people employed as possible. Sir, in wrapping up, this is a time for there to be a deepening of the relationship between the representatives of the workers and the representatives in the private sector. And sir, as we work together, let us remember that we are not doing it for selfish reasons. We are doing it, sir, yes, to support workers and to ensure that people have enough to be able to feed themselves and to feed their families. We're doing it, sir, to ensure that, yes, there's the survival of business that can facilitate the jobs. But, sir, most importantly, we are doing it for the survival of Barbados, the well-being of Barbadians, and to ensure that we create a better life for our people and that there's a brighter and better tomorrow for all. And, sir, as I wrap up, I ask senators to reflect on the fact It's only a little 10 minutes I do tonight. It's only 10 minutes that I've done. A little 10, this is a little 10 minutes because the leader of government business is that they're in a lot of time, so a little 10 minutes. As I conclude, let us, sir, reflect on the words of the author, Mark Twain. Loyalty to the nation all the time. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Mr. President, as I rise to wrap up this debate, I first of all want to thank all honorable members for their presentations, some outstanding presentations. I said at the beginning it was going to be a difficult debate. Indeed, it has been. We recognize the emotions vis-a-vis the Severance Act, but we also recognize the economic conditions of the country and certain things that are absolutely necessary to be done. And at this stage, the amendments here, we understand why they're being done. In addition, we certainly understand that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of some employers in the relationship with the employees. We certainly hope that in the months to come, that certainly the relationship between the union and some of these employers will certainly be addressed and that there will be room for improvement. With these few words, I want to beg that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in detail. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 5 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 10.
Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 6 to 10 stand part.
The question is that clauses 6 to 10 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passes of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill before us be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Severance Payments Amendment Act, 2020.
Question is, the bill before us do now pass and be so cited.
Mr. President, as in the earlier bill, this bill also requires a 2/3 majority and therefore necessitates the vote, which we will commence at this stage. Senator Walker?
Aye.
Senator Moore?
Aye.
Senator McConney?
Aye.
Senator Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Senator Dr. Holden?
Aye.
Senator Adams?
Aye.
Senator Dr. Haynes.
Aye.
Senator Grant.
Aye.
Senator Cummins.
Aye.
Senator Sands. Senator Franklin.
No.
Senator Drakes.
Nay.
Senator Moore.
Aye.
Senator Wiggins.
Aye.
Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers.
Aye.
Senator Nurse.
Aye.
Senator Boyce.
Aye.
Senator Maynard.
Aye.
Senator Tate.
Aye.
Mr. President, 18 honorable senators, 19, sorry. 18, sir. Sorry. And Your Honor, Senator Green, sorry.
Aye.
Who's the count now, please? What's the count?
Mr. President, 18 honorable senators voted in favor, 2 voted against. The vote has therefore reached the threshold of 2/3 majority, and the bill is accordingly passed in accordance with Section 492 of the Constitution. Order number 6 now, sir. In the name of Senator Moore.
You have 3 minutes.
To move the passing of a resolution to approve under Section 3 of the Special Loans Act, Chapter 105, the borrowing by the government of the sum of Barbados $2,493,271 from Scotiabank Barbados Limited to repay an existing overdraft facility held by the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation.
Good night, everyone. This resolution is just a little under $2.5 million. As you know, in 2018, the government of Barbados, as part of their domestic debt exchange, had assumed millions of dollars in loans held by a number of state-owned enterprises. And these were all exchanged for government of Barbados securities, new government of Barbados securities. But overdraft facilities were excluded. So in order to assist some of the SOEs with their financial situation, it was proposed that these overdraft facilities would be closed and converted to term loans, which will be serviced by the government. So within this arrangement, the government sought to address the overdraft facility being held by the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, CBC as we all tend to refer to it. And in accordance with this particular situation, what it would do, it would lower the interest rate that is currently held on this particular overdraft facility, which was at 10%. So under this new arrangement, it would now lower it to 5%, which, as you would recognize, would be certainly a saving, certainly in the interest that would be repaid. And it was proposed that this can be done over 18-month term loan arrangement, paid monthly over these 18 months. Now, notwithstanding the fact that certainly you're saving 5% on the interest, it makes sense because you're carrying something on your books that most companies would have overdraft facilities. I don't think there are very few companies that would not have overdraft facilities, certainly companies of a certain level. So it's not unusual. This overdraft facility would first have been established way back in the 1970s, and over the years would have been increased as business increases. So it's just a very simple resolution. I think everyone knows the CBC does have some financial issues. It, as you would remember, the CBC did retrench some workers in order to sort of modernize and to bring it more within line of what occurs in the 21st century when it sort of comes to broadcasting. Nothing like this is an overnight fix, but all that you do to try to minimize your exposure, certainly in terms of your financial exposure, is part of the process of right sizing and ensuring that the entity then can be viable. And so this is one of those measures. This is a simple resolution in order to repay this. Now, I did hear in another place that it was felt that people were being kept from coming to the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation or not being able to go on television or radio. Absolutely not. I'm here to stand up and say all are welcome at CBC. CBC, all. Now, CBC is a entity, it's a business. So if you would like to advertise at CBC, CBC is looking for advertising. We're not turning away anybody's advertising. We're not sending back anybody's checks. We're not saying we are in debt, but here, have back your money. We don't want it. We'd rather stay $100 million in debt. We're not doing any of those things. So anyone who wants to advertise at CBC, more than welcome. If you watch the CBC News, all kinds of people are on the news. Even my good friend over here, I have to call him my good friend, Senator Franklin, because he is my friend. And he knows he's my friend. We've been friends for a very long time. Senator Franklin, I can say without hesitation, taught me a few things when I was much younger. Now I'm a little older. I would.
We wish no details.
So I can say that there is zero reason why you would not want someone to be on television or on radio. What would be the purpose? CBC is not a monopoly. There are over 15 radio stations in Barbados. In fact, there are 18. There are 18 radio stations in Barbados. So why would CBC not want people on their radio station? Of course, they want everybody, especially advertising. You know, if you have a business, you're looking to ensure your business makes money. The hard-working staff at CBC, and there are some very hard-working staff up there. I can say that. I watch a lot of the reporters, and I see them out in the field myself, and I know how hard they have to work and the things that they have to do. We all know during this last COVID crisis, a lot of what Barbadians learned about the crisis, they learned it from CBC. All of the different PSAs done by different entities, not just the Government Information Service alone, but other entities. There are other entities who had messages that they wanted to put out there, and they did, and they used CBC. And why would they not? It is free to air. Anybody that wants to have a television, I don't care what kind of TV you got, two little rabbit ear antennas, you can go and watch CBC. It doesn't cost you a cent. So, having said this, I'm saying clearly for those in another place, since they did ask me to say something about it, all are welcome. All. So, no, that was from another time, but not now, not in 2020. Like I said, all are welcome. Now, getting back to this resolution, as I said, it's a simple matter. It really doesn't, beyond that, that's about all that's really required here. Is the actual amount. I think the clerk of Parliament did say what it was. It's actually $2,493,271 is the exact amount that we're looking to have convert this facility converted at a 5% as opposed to 10% that would have been paid previously. And with this, Mr. President, I move that this resolution do now pass.
Question is that the resolution on the consideration do now pass. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of our business for today's sitting. I want to thank all honorable members for their keen interest and participation. I believe all 21 members are present, and I believe that they should be all commended for that at 25 minutes to the 11. I want to thank you so much, Mr. President. I now want to beg to move that this sitting be adjourned until Wednesday, the 24th of June at 11 a.m. Thank you.
The question is that this session be now adjourned until Wednesday, the 24th of June at 11 a.m. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we now stand adjourned until next week, Wednesday, the 24th.